Just to remind, there's no one coming in online, but that's obviously there for broadcasting purposes. And it would be helpful if you use the microphones just so you can make sure that you're being picked up on the broadcast. Is everything okay at the back there? Are we ready to roll? Thank you. That's great, thank you. So just start by the evacuation procedure. As usual, you can see the location of the exits. Discovering a fire, please carry out the following: sound the alarm, tap the fire if possible and safe to do so using the appliances provided. On hearing the evacuation signal, please carry out the following: exit the building by your nearest safest exit. All visitors to report to point G, all staff to report to their designated assembly point on Woolpack Way car park. Don't leave the assembly point for any reason until told to do so by the incident controller or fire brigade officer. And Richard, are you in charge tonight?
Apparently so.
Well,
Why are we on run for
it? Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. So moving on to apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Les Smith, substitute Councillor Hancock's, apologies from Councillor Sandra Smith, apologies, substitute Councillor Simmons, welcome to you too. Thank you for subbing, and also apologies from Councillor Rose. Any others? Okay, thank you very much. Any disclosure of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? No, thanks very much. Have we got any questions from the public which aren't here? Okay, so we can move on then to the minutes of the meeting of the board held on the 25th of July. You've got copies here of the minutes. Are there any comments, questions, either on the accuracy or the contents? Starting on page 1, 2 and 3. And 4. Yes,
just thought. Sorry, I'll try and put my phone. Okay. Just following up on our question on the green sheets, we wondered if there was any chance of an update on any viable schemes which have been brought forward to increase our biodiversity.
Are we aware of any?
Well, I can try and give a brief. I'm still waiting for the final figures, but I know that there have been 17, I think it is, to date. But also there might be a few more applications from either North Warwickshire or jointly from North Warwickshire and Leavenworth. And of those, 7 are exclusively North Warwickshire applications. So we've done better than we did last year. I think there may still be a few more to come, so I'm waiting for an update on that. I will say that the scheme so far has been quite oversubscribed. So in terms of the total number of applications has far exceeded the amount that the Green Sheets budget has got in it, which is good in the sense that there's some really strong applications coming forward. So as soon as I know more in terms of how that's shaking out in terms of numbers, I'll put something around and let you know what's happening on that.
That's it. Thank you.
That's really good news. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I've just got a query on point 15. I just wanted to know how the advertising of the hedgehog friendly skimming was going.
Through you, I should have to come back to you on that. I've certainly had nothing back from any hedgehogs to understand how things are going. Yeah, I'll come back to you on that, Councillor.
Thanks. So we need to consider accepting these minutes. So I've got a proposer. Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Gosling. All those in favour? Thank you. They're accepted. I'll just sign those before I finish. Right, thanks very much. So moving on then to item 6, budgetary control report. So the period ended the 31st of August. I don't know whether any of the officers want to make a comment on the papers, or should we just go straight into questions? Okay, into questions then. Has anybody got any points they wish to raise in this one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I see that as of the 31st of August, there's an overspend of 116k noted here. And then at the final outturn for the year, it looks like the overspend has dropped to 71,000 or thereabouts. And I just wasn't clear how we managed to achieve that drop in the overspend. And obviously it's very welcome, but it wasn't clear as I read the paper as to how that had been recovered, that overspend.
Thanks. Is that something for you, Sue?
Mr. Chair, if I may come back on that. It's not that it's been recovered as such. What the estimated outturn is trying to do is to predict position at the end. So what we've included there are things that we're pretty sure we won't be able to recover before the end of the year. Where there's still some uncertainty, we haven't yet included those. So there are some elements of overspend we're hoping to pull back a little bit before the end of the year. But clearly, the next report the board will be a bit closer to the end of the year, and we'll be able to firm some of those figures up.
Okay.
I think we've touched on this sort of wider picture issue of the income that we can expect from these kind of areas that we provide in the way of services in the resources board. And I guess one of the questions is in terms of the cost of living crisis, that the extent to which the income generated through the services that this board is responsible for as part of the wider picture, and people cutting back on those areas of, if you like, luxury and nice bits of life that are fun and enjoyable in order just to survive the cost of living crisis. It's just whether those forecasts that we're looking at in this area and generally are being factored in at the moment in terms of these outcomes, or whether we can expect an even more dismal picture, if I can put it that way, in by the end of the financial year.
Thank you. Was that Simon or who wants to take that?
Well, perhaps, Chair, if I could start.
Oh, right,
off,
you,
sure
sorry,
colleagues
sorry.
will chip in if I'm missing anything. Yes, I mean, it's difficult. We are currently doing some more detailed work around all of the services that report to this board, to try and project forward the position to the end of the year. It is very difficult because things change as we go through the year. So at the moment, it will be our best estimate, but clearly the economic position might either improve or get worse. We really don't know yet. But certainly we are trying to put some more accurate projections in. As I say, we'll only find out if they are more accurate when we come to the end of the year. But a lot of work is going on around the different service areas at the moment.
Thank you. Are there any more? Oh, Andy?
There's been a slight underspend on fly tipping. Basically, there's been an increase, certainly in my patch, for the fly tipping, and what we do to address it.
Through you, Chair. I mean, I think one of the reasons is we've not seen a huge decrease in the amount of fly tipping, but what we have seen is a reduction in the amount of hazardous waste that's been fly tipped. Hazardous waste is far more expensive for us to clear, especially as contracted. So, in terms of the profiling of the amount of waste we're picking up as much as we ever have done, but at a lower cost because we've been able to do more of it in-house. There is a separate budget dealing with tackling fly tipping from an education, from CCTV, from a prosecution point of view, brought to the Safe Community subgroup on that piece of work as well. So the next update report on that, I'm more than happy to circulate to members. If that helps you with the overall picture about what we're doing to try and tackle the wider issue, but certainly in terms of what we're picking up just as much, just it's not costing us quite as much to do it, Councillor.
Maria? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 14, the green space budget, we've got number of pitches 12, number of teams 23, number of hires 23, income per team 390, but we haven't got the total of all those teams, which I make us £8,990, £99 and a penny. Where is that total of those teams in the budget?
So is that part of the income?
Chair, yes, it will be part of the overall income. I mean, if the council would like some specific information around the income that we get per team, then we can provide that separately.
It's there per team. I just didn't have the collective at the end. I had all the information otherwise. It just was not collected.
Yes, sorry, Chair. It will be in. If you looked in Appendix A, it's within those figures within Appendix A, which sets out the costs of individual services.
I will seek compliance.
While he's just looking, I'll just take
Carry on.
councillor Gosling.
Just a small point on the recycling. We were expected to process 50% of the waste, or 50% of waste recycled, and it's down to 46.9. I wondered if there was any reasons that we understood as to why the recycle rates dropped.
Through you again, Chair, there's a couple of reasons. Nationally, the picture's gone this way, so all councils are recycling less than they were. Not entirely sure the reason for that is, but it's we saw a change in attitudes and behaviour when we moved into the first lockdowns and far more people were working from home. Whether that's the reverse of that happening, more people going back to the offices, has led to a reduction in recycling rate. We're not sure. It's certainly it reflects the national picture. But more widely than that, we're having difficult conversations with the reprocessor about waste. They are a little bit harsher in their assessment of what constitutes what we call non-target material. So everything that goes into the bin in theory is recyclable. Every plant that recycles waste handles it slightly differently, and we're seeing less of the waste that we've had recycled before actually finding its way through to recycling, which obviously affects that target. We're working on that at the moment. In fact, we're looking to see whether we can go to an alternative provider of that service at the moment. And of course, the new MRF will be open from July next year to accept waste, and we'll be taking our material through there in the future. So that will improve that position. But those are the reasons behind that.
Can I just follow up? There's social media, so possibly very untrue, but there's been a reflection that one pizza box will invalidate an entire load of recycling. That's if you put a pizza box which has got grease on it into your recycling, but that has the potential to invalidate the whole wagon load of recycling.
Not true.
I didn't think so, but is there, with you talking about the kind of the quality of recycle that's going through and those difficult conversations, are they around some of those things?
Yeah, so, I mean, non-target material will largely depend on what the reprocessor is able to get rid of at a price that makes it worth them doing. So it's a bit of a moving target at the best of times. But in terms of contamination, there's always an allowance within the load. No load that goes through is absolutely pure and everything within it would be absolutely fine and dandy. We usually work around about 10% tolerance level, maybe even more than that. Now, that's not to say we would encourage people to put on, nappies and garden waste and all that sort of things there, but it can handle it. Those sorts of things you would expect to see, for whatever reason, coming through the normal recycling stream, because the wrong stuff gets in. The worst thing is liquid. So things that make particularly paper wet are bad for us. So if you're not emptying out your bottles when you're putting them in, if there's food material that's significant, so not the grease on a pizza box, but if you're throwing away whole containers of unused ready meals and that sort of thing, and they're bursting inside the wagons, then those contaminants will spread throughout the load, which will make it harder for it to be reprocessed. But in the case of cardboard and paper, for example, the whole thing gets to a giant washing machine effectively when it gets to the paper mill. So there's quite a lot more tolerance in these things than you would think. But having said that, the purer the material, the better the price you get for it. And in these economic times, that's what the reprocessors are looking for.
Thank you.
Councillor Singh, Major.
Yeah. 3.7, the current underspend. Is that due to we having difficulty in filling them vacancies or just underspend? Immediately.
Community cleaning.
I mean, again, through you, Chair, it's a bit of both. So we are using agency work to cover some of the vacancies that we've got, and so there's a little bit of a saving there. Members will be aware of the budgetary pressures that we're under as a council as well, and therefore there are things that we try to do to try and keep our budgets as low as possibly can, while still delivering the service. I have to stress, the service delivery is the priority. So there's a little a bit of sort of not rushing to fill vacancies, but also we're using agency to cover critical service areas as well. So, and we've said, Chair, I believe we've brought a report here before, looking at options to rationalise service delivery and make it more efficient, and we'll be coming back again to this board in the future with further ideas on that.
Right. Okay. Can I just add one? Oh, sorry, I'll continue in a minute. Councillor Sims. Can I just ask about cesspool emptying? And can we do a review of that and come back to the board? We're making loss. So questions: do we need to do it at all? A. B. If we're doing it, can we make at least break even and not make a loss? You know, what are the options on that? So that'd be great. We could bring that forward at another time.
Yeah, just briefly, Chair, we are reviewing that at the moment. There are two problems. One is that Southern Trent put their disposal costs up on a regular basis. The other thing is availability of sites. So there should be 3 within our borough where we can dispose. And at any one time, you might be lucky if one of those 3 is open. And of course, it's very difficult to plan your routes. If you think you're going to one location, which you follow, and actually you're going to the other end of the borough to do it. So there is, you know, it does cause us headaches. We are looking at our cost structure. We need to try and be fair to everybody when we look at our revisions. But I'm hoping that, you know, when we come to the fees and charges, you know, at the end of this current cycle, we'll be coming forward with a different charging regime for cesspool emptying to try and make sure we can break even on that service.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to ask about a couple of services actually. One of them was the cesspool emptying, so you've obviously already asked that. The other one was Holsworth Sports Centre, where we're hiring the facility but making a loss. We're only hiring it when we want to use it, the actual school facility. So it's a case of, you know, is that the right thing? Have we got the balance right in that provision of that service and how we're procuring that at the moment?
Thanks. Simon, is that you?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, there are one or two things, a couple of things that are working against us. It's an issue that we've got under review, and in actual fact, we've got a meeting about it tomorrow. So after that, we can share some additional information. But we're slightly down on gymnastics-related income than where we predicted to be. We've had slightly higher staff costs, one of them due to maternity leave. And we've also, as the board is aware, had some disruption from the school having to close earlier than we were anticipating doing. We also believe that some income is being held by a company that collects income on our behalf that hasn't yet reached the budget. So the situation might not be exactly as described there, but we'll get to the bottom of that tomorrow and we'll update the board.
Thank you. That'd be really helpful. And no more questions or comments, then the recommendation is that the report be noted and the board requests any further information it feels will assist in monitoring the budgets under the board's control, which I think we've done. So, thank you, Malin. Sorry. And the seconder, proposer, second. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 7, National Food Hygiene Rating Scheme. Increase to charging for requested re-inspections. I don't know if any of you want to add anything to the report. It is pretty clear. Basically, it is being proposed that the charge for a re-inspection is raised to £175 from whatever it was, 140 something, 140. Yeah. So, any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Chen. Oh.
Go on.
Thank you.
Ladies.
Oh, sorry.
No, it was just whether this is actually a cost recovery and the basis of the costs that we've got now, which is 175. And I guess in terms of inflation and the demand that for re-inspection by businesses, what thinking has gone on behind that figure of 175? Because it looks like we've, proportionately on year, it's an increase of £7 a year, which I'm not sure does keep pace with inflation and what we might expect if we were on a business footing.
I'm going to take Councillor Jordan's question.
It's actually along exactly the same lines as Councillor Chambers, where this extra £35 figure came from, and if it is actually enough to cover our costs for a re-inspection.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. And
On a very similar line, is it comparable with other councils and other, whether it's the same
very
as or?
good point. Okay, so is it covering costs? Is it comparable to other places? Thank you. Oh, welcome.
Thank you.
Sharon,
That's my
to
first
Alan.
one, so thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, I did some benchmarking before we put the report together, just to give you an idea of what our local, our neighbours are charging. So Warwick charged £227.70.
That'll do.
Coventry are charging 207. They're a lot bigger an authority than we are. And then Lichfield is a very similar size to us, and they're charging 175. And we based it on obviously officer costs. An average inspection would take probably 2 hours. Travel to the site, cost of admin subsequently following the inspection, and we came up with what we thought was a fair and reasonable increase given the cost of living, given post-COVID, and what these businesses have already suffered already. Then obviously we've got the imminent rise in energy costs for businesses. So we thought it was a reasonable increase I appreciate it's not as much as some are charging, but we are a small authority. And speaking from experience of the types of businesses that are asking for a revisit, they're small independent businesses. We're not a local authority or a borough that has your large multinational, the multinationals in the borough. They are small independents. So we were considering the business as well. Whilst they should be doing it from a regulatory point of view, when it becomes mandatory, hopefully soon, I don't know whether you're aware, but it's not mandatory to display the food hygiene rating score in this country. It is in Wales, it is in Northern Ireland, it is in Scotland. So hopefully that will drive standards up if it's mandatory, but at the moment it's a case of us going out, so it's resource. But we just consider that a reasonable figure.
Yeah, and just on that, I'm not sure why the size of the authority makes a difference unless we're paying our people a lot less than anybody else, because it's about how much does a visit cost. So that's it's a strange basis on which to give the fee.
Yeah, I think going on. Yeah, I think if you do benchmark salaries as well, we are at the lower end for a professional officer.
Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The point was just made that it's not mandatory to display the food rating, which I find that quite interesting. I only found that out quite recently. I find it quite interesting. If that's not the case, is there some way that people can access that information through the internet?
Yeah, you can get an app for your phone. It's all there on the internet, but it's how accessible that is for a lot of people as well. A lot of people don't know it's on the internet. A lot of people, like my mum, wouldn't know how to access it on the internet. Whereas if you're walking up and down a high street and you're looking at 3 different cafes or 3 different restaurants and you see a 5, a 3 and a 1, you're going to go into the one that's a 5. So the sooner this Food Standards Agency make it mandatory, the sooner we can drive up standards.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point. I'll take that first then, Councillor Parker.
Just a question of where are we at with inspections? Are we up to date? Are there a lot of outstandings? What are we looking at?
We are behind with our inspections. We're still working on 21-22, but the Food Standards Agency have initiated a recovery plan that all local authorities have to adhere to. So we're on track with the recovery plan, and the recovery plan means that at this moment, by the end of October, we should have inspected all of our A's, all of our B's, and our high-risk C's, and that means the poor-performing C's. I don't know whether you want me to explain the ABCs, but it's A to E.
Right, you perhaps better tell us. So A is a organisation.
A is a high-risk or poor-performing business.
Oh, it's the other way, right? Okay.
Yeah, so A is you inspect them every 6 months because they're either poor-performing or they're a high-risk business. A B is every year, a C is every 18 months, a D is 2 years, and an E is 3 years.
Thank you, that's really useful. So I think what we're saying then, I'll come to you in a minute, is that, you know, we are questioning whether that's enough. And because I know we're not allowed to make a profit, but we can recover our costs and we need to recover. So we need a review at some point to make sure that it's not costing us money, because these are re-inspections. And so, you know, if they got it right the first time, we're going to have to pay.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
There's a bit of that in it as well. So that's good. And then it's good to know that we are catching up on the inspections, on the recovery plan. Sorry, you two both.
It was going to be exactly that point, that we need to be incentivising people to get it right in the first place.
Yes, absolutely.
And part of this charge is the incentivisation to not need a re-inspection.
Absolutely.
By always performing and providing a decent service.
Mm. So I don't know how often we review this. Is it annually to review the charge?
Well, Chair, no, this is the reason for this increase, because we haven't reviewed it since we started back in 2017.
Right. So there will be an annual review now then after this one, because we want to know that we are covering our costs. So if you could come back to us to see if that £175 is the right amount.
Absolutely.
That would be fantastic. Mark.
That was along the lines of what I was going to suggest, that there should be an annual review. It shouldn't have been left 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Brilliant. That's okay to everybody. Right, so the recommendation is that the increased charges be introduced on a cost recovery basis for inspections requested by food businesses, as in the report. And I'm going to add to that, and that there's an annual review of that charge. Right, can I have a proposal for that? Thank you, Marion, and second, Mark, and all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? No. Thank you very much. So moving on. Item 8 is the climate change action plan update, and you'll see we have, for your convenience, put the action plan in the papers. And these are the results of the public consultation, as you can see down. There are full results in each group room if you want to see in more detail. And we are just being asked to comment on those, on that feedback. This will also go to the Climate Change Action Group, who will look at it in detail. But this is our opportunity if you've got any comments or questions to make. Anyone? Yes?
I'd just like to say, as chair of the Climate Action Group, that we welcome any comments from councillors, and as I know that Councillor Chambers is on the group as well. But it's just a case of every board needs to take note that we do have this climate change action plan to incorporate, and whether you be on planning or CEB or safer communities, you just need to think about climate change, what effects can happen to it by your actions in taking a certain decision. That's all I wanted to say. I don't want to bore anyone.
Great, thank you. A really good point. It has to be in everything that we do. So,
I welcome the summary of the consultation responses, and there are some really quite important points that have been made, both in terms of strategic comments as well as the detail. And I suppose I've got two questions really. One is, how are these comments that have come in from the public and from organisations going to be, or have they already been assimilated into this draft that we've got in front of us? And if some of them can't actually be, responded to in very concrete terms, then how are we going to give feedback to those individuals and organisations that have done that? Because we're certainly on planning, where there's a big policy issue, we usually sort of say what the consultation response was and what the response of the local authority has been, if it can respond either positively or no, that's not possible. And I think we need to, in fairness to those that did respond, make sure that we get back to them. And I certainly welcome the opportunity to look at those responses again at the Climate Change Action Group, group that's coming. One thing that struck me in terms of the action plan itself that we've got, and I'm not sure yet whether we've got another date for the Climate Change Action Plan in our diaries, but there are several things that we've committed to to have achieved by 2022. And I think it would be helpful to know where we are around those commitments that we've made in taking certainly this year's targets forward. And I know some progress has already been made on some of them in relation to the use of hydrogenated oils and so on, and so on. So it would be really helpful. I guess the thing that I would comment on, and you'd expect us to on this side, is that obviously the responses that came in and the context in which this climate change action plan was drawn up was with quite a positive wind at national level for this whole area of expecting our borough and indeed our organisations to work towards net zero. And it would appear, and that may not be accurate, but it would appear that we're actually taking a lurch backwards in the current climate in terms of the leadership now that we have in government. And so I hope, and I'm sure we'll pick this up again at the Climate Change Action, that doesn't mean that as a borough council we will be taking a lurch backwards in relation to our commitment to this, because it's certainly one of the most important things I think we all want to see happen. And it would be unfortunate if, just because the national context may or may not change, that we don't see ourselves as a borough certainly continue to push this forward locally.
Thanks very much. I'll come to Richard in a minute. So basically what we're saying is this feedback that we've got, first of all, is it included in this version? I didn't think it was. No, that is the original one. And secondly, so when this goes to the group, to see what's going to be accepted, as you like, into it, and then feedback on what we can't accept at this stage, possibly, because we can't afford it or it's not practical or whatever. And then we need to publish those reasons. And then the other point that Jeff made, which is really important, is that when does this group report back here? Now, if there are targets for 2022, then we would like at the end of the year to see this come back with, this is how far we got with our targets. That's sort of some of what you said, Jeff. Thank you. So, Richard.
Yeah, and thanks, Joe. And through you, I think that's quite a lot of feedback you're saying that sort of thing as well, because this is a progress where you need to know how you're getting on. Regular refresh of the action plan, regular review of those KPIs. And I think that, there was quite a lot around, we need to be a little bit more precise in exactly what our targets are, how we're going to measure them, how often we're going to review them, and what success looks like. So I think one of the recommendations I'll be making to the group is that we beef up that side of things in terms of what does that benchmarking data tell us, whether that needs to be broken down in more detail by service area, what targets are we setting for ourselves, and are we achieving them, and how often we're going to review this in terms of both performance, but also refresh it to see what extra needs to be added in moving forward. So certainly we'll pick up on all of those things. Just from my reading of the consultation response, I think the other things we probably need to focus on, apart from things like smarter targets, KPIs, and information on that side of things, how often we refresh it. There needs to be a bigger focus on adaptation. I think there's one of the messages coming through. Yes, climate change is happening. It has happened. It continues to happen. You can't just mitigate it. You need to deal with it. The implications of it. So I think a bit of a focus on that as well. A couple of people said it needs to be more mention of health and well-being. So I think yes, absolutely, I get that. We'll get that into the plan as well. An awful lot of what people said is not necessarily us to do on our own. It's to do with stakeholders and the leader organisations are organisations on our own. I will say one thing: the local transport plan consultation is out at the moment. Warwickshire County Council local transport plan, and there's an awful lot of transport for one reason or another that is key to being able to achieve some of the outcomes in our action plan and others as well. So I will circulate the details of how to feed into that consultation this week, Chair, to the members of this board. But I would encourage everybody to have a look at that, because I think local transport is key to a lot of this as well.
Just a few points, mostly about our stakeholders. Do we have an understanding of how many of our stakeholders and our key partners have fed into the consultation? Because obviously a lot of our commitments are key, or their input into our commitments is key to actually being able to deliver it. And on top of that, is it worthwhile putting together a climate group So a climate action group response to the transport consultation.
Is it still open?
It is still open. I think it's got a couple of weeks to run, Chair. I'll double check there. I've certainly got a week or two left to run before it closes. I can certainly have a look at that in terms of a response, both for consultation responses that have come back to us and what our own plan says about local transport in terms of drafting something up, and maybe running that past the group before we submit it. So I'm happy to do that if that's what the board would like to do. In terms of stakeholders, I think we had 7 responses from organisations as opposed to individuals or other groups. There are a couple of stakeholder groups that meet regularly at officer level and officer member level. So there's a Warwickshire Climate Change group, and we've met the representation on that with Hanover, as much as our representative on that. There's also a West Midlands Sustainability Partnership, which is a wider group, as the name suggests, but it doesn't just include local authorities. It includes things like health, blue light services, larger education organisations, and things like that as well. So there's quite a lot of work done at the stakeholder level. It's done through that and Sustainability West Midlands group as well. We sit on that through me as part of that, so we feed into that group as well.
Thank you. So what was the, oh, sorry, Councillor Major.
I've just got one comment. It's about bikes, cycling. As we're encouraging cycling, we do need more bike sheds across North Warwickshire in prominent sites. I mean, the bikes these days are worth nearly up to £1,000, and I've had comments. People want to bring their bikes to town, but they want to park somewhere where they can be seen. We've got a bike rack, walk back car park now, but that's covered by the car park meters, so you can't even park your bike there much now. And I think there's one by the swimming bath, but that's a bit out of the way. So encouraging bikes is good, but we do need bike racks as well, so there's somewhere where you can park them.
It's a really good point.
Look to that, Chair.
Thank you. Lovely. Right. Okay, so I think what we're saying is then that when this action plan comes back to us, we could have a note on what we've accepted from the consultation and what we haven't, and why, or what's going to be delayed if it's going in another version later on, and also that we would like to see how far we've got with the targets that we've already set at an appropriate time to come back to this group. I think that's what we've agreed.
So through you, Chair, next protocol for this, once revised, is executive board.
All right.
A policy, and I can make it clear in the report exactly as what you phrased, what we've included, what we can't at this stage, when they might include further drafting. But I will, of course, bring a review back to this board for year end to let you know how we're getting on with those 2022 targets.
That's great. Thank you very much. So the recommendation is that the members of the Climate Change Group considers the responses, the public consultation, amends the action plan accordingly, so the final version can be brought back to a future meeting of the exec board for approval and adoption, and it'll also come here. So proposer, please. Thank you. Councillor Singh, second Councillor Parker. Those in favour? Thanks very much. Moving on then to the Green Space and Plain Strategies report. Item 9. So you've got that in front of you. And as there's an additional sort of item at the back on the Baxley in blue proposal. So any comments or questions on that? Yes.
Basically to do with the Boots Hill recreation ground. What seems to cause the hold up the training facility at the moment?
Through you, Chair, I think the hold up is dismantling the only part of the change in accommodation that was of any value to us. In the concrete structure on which the change in accommodation sat is so thick that it's taken them weeks and weeks to dig it out in order to put the floating substructure in. Please do not ask me any technical information about this floating substructure. It's taken them a long time to undertake that piece of work, which they had to do to get the new system in. they've reached the end of that. So we haven't got a definitive completion date yet, but we will have shortly, and clearly we'll let ward members know when that is. But that's been the delay. It's taken them weeks and weeks to dig out the concrete substructure for the change of accommodation.
So the floating floor's actually been installed now?
Through you again, Chair, they're about to embark on that process.
Right.
Councillor Parker.
Sorry, just want to clarify then, with the extra work that's gone on to remove this, are we incurring any extra costs on this?
Again, through you, Chair, the answer to that question is no. And our facilities management colleague has commented that the company cannot possibly be making any money out of this any longer. They've been on the job so far, but we're not incurring additional costs.
Councillor Chambers, then Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to raise the tension that there is between accessibility and which is under 416, and our guides and analysis of how accessible our sites are, including our play areas and open spaces, versus the safety and security measures that have been taken to make our site secure. Because one of the things I'm picking up, certainly locally, is that for grandmothers and grandfathers that want to take their kids into, for example, Kitwood Recreation Ground, and there are a number of others that have been mentioned to me, it is almost impossible if you are sitting in a mobility scooter or a wheelchair to actually take your grandkids onto these recreation grounds, because the access is difficult to get through. And I don't know how you resolve that tension, but it does seem to be something that has been mentioned, that certainly in relation to at least 3 of our recreation grounds. And I know that Becky gave me a reply that said we're reviewing this, but it would be helpful to know, what the process is around that review and how that tension between security and safety and blocking somewhere off versus access by people that are disabled and need, more accessibility onto these grounds is going to be resolved, and whether there's anybody done any thinking about what the best way is forward and how much that's going to cost to change our approach.
Is that you?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. It's really difficult to find a solution that lets the goodies in and keeps the baddies out. So we are doing a review of all of our sites, and we're looking at where we've had recent traveller incursions, but also where we're getting kind of quad bikes and that kind of stuff on site. So we've gone round with our prevent crime officer as part of police, and been out with our community safety person. So that review is taking place, and we're trying to find a solution that lets mobility scooters in but keeps kind of quad bikes and motorbikes out. And part of the work that we're doing with Access Able is we're looking at the contract review will be to work with them to see if they've got any ideas. I mean, there's all sorts of like A-frames and K-frames and Sheffield bars and all sorts of things, but to try and get that balance of, allowing a parent with a double buggy through without, keeping some of the baddies out, it is difficult, but, hopefully future board meeting will have a report to bring forward, but that work is ongoing. Can I also add as well, we're also setting up a disability forum, and so hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit more consultation around accessibility as well as part of this work. I'll take that.
Thank you, it's very welcome. Thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. First one, I'm really pleased to see the appendix on the Baxter in Bloom, and particularly the Century Garden. Baxter is not part of my Borough Council ward, obviously, but it is part of my County Council division, and I was really pleased to give them a small grant from the County Council grant fund towards that Century Garden. So I'm really pleased to see that that's going ahead in the report. And my second was just a question about the 4.3.1 about the trees officer yet again. I know we're using the County Council now to do some of that work. Is the intention at some point to advertise again for trees? Is that more, or is it just going to be left as it is now? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, that is a live issue too. There's now been a wider review of the staff structure within community development. I discussed it with the Chief Executive last week. So it'll be taken through to management team and then subject to management team's deliberations through to special subgroup after that. So the intention within that thus far is clearly to go out again at some point, both in respect to the Green Space Officer and the Officer for Trees, maybe with a slightly different context added to the green space officer position, but I don't wish to prejudge the consideration of my corporate colleagues on that, but it's a live issue.
Thank you.
Councillor Humphries, did you have a point?
Thank you, Chair. It's just really same. Becky said we've got a problem at Birchmoor, and we've got 3 people in electric wheelchairs, and they can't get into the sports ground. But when we've had a site meeting, they agreed that they don't want it open wide for the trouble that they had before this pillar in the middle was put in, and we haven't got a solution yet. So we were thinking of a removable pillar, like you have in car parking space when they've got things going on in the actual field, because they have to go on such a big wide detour to get into a village function. But it's the cost of those, and it comes down to us paying apparently. But if you've got any ideas when you are looking round, we'd be interested in finding out what your answers are, because that's all I've come up with, is one of those lockable ones that I can remove.
Yeah, through you, Chair. And one of the issues with the removable bollards is they're so easy to cut through the padlock. But when you have them, and that's your only kind of mitigating, they just cut it and can drive through. So yeah, we'll certainly look at, you know, any sites that you want us to absolutely include it in the report.
Great, thank you.
Just continuing with security, we obviously welcome the anti-ram bollards at Bretts Hall, which has seen significant antisocial behaviour and bikes and other things. And although it's not going to stop the bikes, it will stop some. But there are, I suppose, other things that we seem to be missing. So Bretts Hall is a really good example that's got CCTV. But the CCTV at the moment isn't admissible evidence because the data stamp's wrong. It's been wrong for about a year, and the parish council have been claiming that they've been trying to deal with it, and also kind of looking at the improvements to Sycamore. It's one of those things that we really have to keep an eye on because it gets vandalised quite easily, and if it's damaged or if it's not actually in place, then it kind of is encouraging that social behaviour because they know that they can damage it easily and get through quite easily. And I just think we have to be really careful to make sure that what is in place is actually being maintained and monitored really closely.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. I can pick up. I wasn't aware of the CCTV issue, so I'll pick that up with the police officer that's dealing with all of those and make sure that's sorted. We've also got the contractor for Bretts Hall to replace all the broken fencing as well, so that should help.
Yeah.
And there's some money through Police and Crime Commissioner to put in some additional A gates to stop them.
Brilliant. Councillor Hancock.
Just a couple of points from me. Obviously, we saw damage at Poles of Abbey Green from the new development, which is really disappointing considering we paid money on it. We went through consultation for it to last, I think it's about 4 weeks, which is really disappointing for the area. The issue though I find is that I don't think there is ever a utopia in these situations. If you start fencing off places, no one ever goes to them and it looks horrible. And if you don't, then unfortunately the minority ruin it for the majority. So it'd be great if we could, but I don't see any opportunity to actually ever stop this, which is really disappointing. And I think that may come to the point of where we decide what we actually do with these areas in development. You know, how much do we spend developing these areas when they're not being looked after? You know, 4 weeks, and I think I saw Hurley or Wood End was damaged after a couple of weeks and stuff. It's just really disappointing from our point as a council that we are trying to develop these areas and all the hard work just seems to go to waste after a couple of weeks. And secondly, on the playing pitch strategy, obviously, I know Simon's always fed up with me with this, but it is one of the biggest things that concerns me with our area. We are having massive development. And at the moment, if I just take the football club I'm involved in, we have 155 children playing on a Saturday morning at the moment. And we are probably an average size village football team. If you look at Aviston Rangers are obviously in this paper at the moment, Aviston Rangers probably 30 teams. That is a huge amount. And guess what? We're running out of space. And that, you know, you can't keep extending Station Road with more pitches. It just, the land is the land. You can't expand it. So I do welcome that hopefully next year we might actually have a plan that means that we can extend and have a lot more pitches in North Warwickshire, because I've only mentioned 2 teams. There is a hell of a lot in our area.
Simon, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I can respond very briefly. I think the important point there is to ensure that these clubs and teams engage with the consultants on the strategy and set out their demands and their expectations moving forward for growth, so that due account can be taken. Obviously, the playing pitch strategy refers to the development of facilities like artificial grass pitches, 3G artificial grass pitches. They have a very significant potential impact on our ability to meet a growing demand and things like that. But the important thing is to make sure that these organisations engage in this process so that due account is taken. But the point is extremely well made.
Is there any chance the council could email the clubs or the local leagues to say that this is what's happening in our area, and so they can actually put their point through? Is that an easy thing to do?
Through you, Chair. Again, yes. Becky and I have met with the consultants that have been appointed to undertake this commission. Clearly, we'll be talking to them about consultation processes and making sure that there's effective communication out so that all the relevant stakeholders know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thanks very much for that then. So the recommendation is that we note and comment on the progress made in respect to the implementation of priorities of the North Warwickshire Green Space Strategy and the playing pitch strategy, and that members approve the principle of the authority entering into a service land agreement with Baxterley and Gloom to create and manage a cemetery garden and wildfire meadow with Baxterley Recreation Ground, subject to the terms of that agreement being approved by the chairman, vice chairman and opposition spokesperson for the board. Have I got a proposer for that? Thank you, Councillor Jones. Seconded. Councillor Hancock. Those in favour? Thank you very much. So, moving on then to item 10, sports pitch provision in Addiston. There's going to be a slight change to the recommendation in this one. So, where we are is that in the playing pitch strategy, there is mention of 2 3G pitches, and we, of course, in the borough, we are at the point where we could support a proposal to the Football Foundation for one, at least, of these pitches at this stage. And the question is, we can only support one, but where do we do it? And you'll see the paper, the Football Foundation sets out quite clearly its criteria for success, if you like, in that bid. So we have looked at 3 locations in Addiston, 3 potential locations, and how far they meet those criteria. And that is Queen Elizabeth School, the football club, Addiston Football Club, and Royal Meadow Drive Sports Club, which has got more than football. So, and it's the latter one that seems to be meeting most of the criteria. However, we aren't quite clear that they are ready at this stage. They are the most advanced. So we are just being asked to comment at this stage and just note the progress, and we'll come back with a recommendation at a later date. Okay. Yes.
Just, do we have an ambition to do the second one? And what's the timeline on that?
Yeah, the second one will be in Polesworth, and it is linked to the housing development and the 106 money that will come from that. So that's where that will be located. And in addition to that, Queen Elizabeth School is looking at the resurfacing of their sand-based one that they use for hockey. It's a special surface for hockey, and it needs refurbishing, which is something that they're going to do. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can I just ask whether, if we put this on hold, depending what you say, then are we going to run out, or is the opportunity going to be lost in terms of the time frame for getting this funded? And I wasn't clear what that was, because it would be unfortunate if we missed the boat.
Absolutely. Simon, do we know that?
Through you, Chair, we're actively engaged with the Football Foundation. It was that organisation that came to us, being already aware of our playing pitch strategy and the local football facilities plan, and it was asking us where we were in terms of progressing developments. They are acutely aware of the latest situation, and just to build slightly on what the Chair has said, the reason for the slight change in the context of this report is that there's been a lot of work done with governing bodies on the site at Royal Meadow Drive as recently as last week. And it's that's caused the reason just to have a review of pitch configurations and things like that. The Football Foundation is aware of that. The FA were a party to these meetings. There is no reason to believe that we're losing the opportunity immediately, but clearly there is a degree of wanting to make progress and want to make it sooner rather than later to make sure that we don't lose that opportunity. So clearly we need to keep the momentum going forward with Addiston Sports Club, the same as we do with Addiston Town Community Football Club and the Queen Elizabeth Academy. Absolutely. So I'm not fretting too much about losing that opportunity at this moment in time, but we need to be mindful of that.
Just following that a bit more though, does it need to come back to this forum to agree finally the one that we're going to support? Because I don't want to delay it to a meeting if that's going to disrupt it.
Again, through you, Chair, that there will be a need. I think, given the tension that exists between the playing pitch strategy and the local football facilities plan, and being that you're not going to have a playing pitch strategy, a new and revised one, for about 12 months, there'll be a need to come back to a board. It could be this one, it could be the executive board. There'll be a board passing by at an appropriate time for us to engage with that. So I don't think we need to worry too much about that. And part of it is being clear with the Football Foundation about exactly where we're at so that they know that we're progressing matters. So as long as we get the communication right, we should be all right.
Can I suggest though that so when you are clear what your recommendation that our recommendation should be, that the perhaps chair, vice chair and spokesperson can agree this, and then it can go to whichever board is passing by at that stage. But I think we representatives from this group have to be able to agree that, because it's so central to what we're doing. So if we can agree that that is the case, that you'll come back to those key people and say now is the time that we need to make a decision. It does look as if the Addiston Sports Club is so far advanced, it's unlikely that either of the other contenders will be in a position to challenge that in this time frame, because they're not ready and they don't meet the criteria yet. So, but nevertheless, final decision should be made by members of this board. Thank you.
Chair, I mean, I take what Simon said, and the confidence that he brings that we're not going to miss the boat. But I mean, you've made a suggestion which I'm sure we would, well, certainly from this side we would support, which is that the Royal Meadow, proposal is the preferred option and meets the criteria. You said, Simon, that the Football Foundation are aware of. I mean, it's small issues, isn't it, in terms of configuration against the overall plan. I would have thought. Can't we just agree that in principle this is the one that we want to support as a board, and then the detail in terms of the proposals could then go forward? I don't quite know why we want to continue to debate the options, really.
I think that's a really good point. I think I'm quite happy to amend the recommendation that we at this point would see that organisation as being our preferred option, and then again when the final decision's made it can come back to that small group of people just to sign it off. But that's the view of the board at this stage, and that we'll see the final when they made up their mind about their configuration. It can come back here just for confirmation.
Going into recession. Fast. So let's grab the money if we can. Yes.
Through you, Chair, but perfectly happy with that. Obviously, the other issues that's just at play in the background are the planning related implications and the need for planning approval and things like that, which might get affected by pitch configuration issues and all that sort of business. But I'm sure we can resolve all that out. So perfectly happy with that.
Yes.
I've read the report very, very carefully, and I can see the argument for going with the sports club, as it were, and it's a very good argument. There are going to be possibly a lot of angry football fans on a Saturday afternoon that won't see their 3G pitch for some time, possibly. But you can't knock back it, I don't think. You can't knock back it with all the evidence that you put here in front of us. So that's it, Chair.
Thank you. Dan?
I think we just, we need to approve the Addison Sports Club. I understand Councillor Jordan's point on the Sheepy Road area, but the point is that one of the clubs that's going to use here has got girls football teams, which is massive for us, especially with their recent successes. I think that the fact that they've got rugby, cricket, it's multi-sports, and that's what we want to be as a council. We want to be supporting multi-sports. So I think it's quite an easy decision, really.
Yeah, I think we should make the point that there's a lot of supporting comments in here about the football club, and we are continuing to work with them and work on their business plan, which is, we're really engaged with them.
I was just going to say the risk factors of the other two seem much higher for us to actually be able to attain the grant and actually keep it and to make sure that we secure that investment. And I also personally welcome the commitment that they've shown to girls football.
Absolutely. Right, so I'm going to try and amend.
Can I suggest, given the kind of potential for concerns to be raised, that we get the summary of why we're doing, or that is our preferred option, very clearly as a communication ahead of it becoming public knowledge.
Yes, I think when everything's sorted, we definitely need to do that, and to make the statement, which is quite true, that we are still working with the other two contenders on their development and their contributions to the community, which are very important to us. So I'm going to try and do this recommendation on the hoof, so let's see how we go. So we can use quite a bit of this, but members note the outlined recent developments in respect to the sports pitch provision in Addison, and that we recognise our preferred option for the 3G pitch is Addison Sports Club. Do we need to add to that it'll come back at some point to the three people we mentioned? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, so and that the final decision will come back to the chair, vice chair and spokesperson at the appropriate time. That's okay. Everybody all right? Did you get that? Thank goodness I've got to repeat it. Okay. I've got a proposal for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Seconded by Councillor Singh. Thank you very much. Those in favour? Against? No. That's great. Thank you very much. Right, so we move on to the Leisure Facilities Service Improvement Plan, which you've got in front of you there. And I'm going to just take comments and questions, if there are any. Okay, I'll go straight to the recommendation then. The board notes and comments upon the progress made against the requirements identified in the approved 2022-23 Leisure Facilities Service Improvement Plan, through which operational performance is monitored, and that the board approves the revised leisure facilities for Christmas and New Year opening hours, as detailed at paragraph 4.7. Proposal for that, please. Thank you. Councillor Gosling, seconded. Councillor Parker. Excuse me. Those in favour? Against? Moving on again. So now we go to the Leisure Facilities Local Training. Also, were you sitting there and still waiting to do
Great work again.
Well, it's so good that it's such an interesting meeting that we have met members. So, item 12, Leisure Facilities Local Training Companies Service Specification. I just want to make it really clear at this stage that this group is responsible for the service specification. Other boards will be, exec particularly, will be looking at things like the business case and the contractual documents. So this is just part of that, and this is what we have to focus on, is the service service level specification. So I'm open to questions. It's there. We've now got a nice 70-page report. Yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
Well, I don't know how to put this kindly, really, but my heart sank.
You're not the only one.
I suspect this may be the demands of this sort of work, but to me, this felt like a strangely sort of old-fashioned way of presenting what you want services to look like. A bit inputty and a bit trying to do absolutely everything, which for this level of specification seemed to me a bit over the top. And I just thought it needed a change of emphasis, I felt, a bit more about exception reporting. So what people want to know is an overall, what the service looks like if it's good, and really successful. And then what needs to be reported back if it's not quite looking like that, rather than trying to predict every little thing that could go right or wrong. I just felt it slightly over the top is perhaps the best way to put it.
Yeah, I must say I absolutely agree with you. I have to say it is. This is what contracts are like, though, isn't it? It's just so tedious. And we have followed the Treasury Green Book and the Sport England template to our peril, really. But anyway, we've done it. But I still think I want to pick up on what you said, because I think that's a really important point. But I'll just let Simon just respond first, and then I'll come back and suggest it. I wasn't going to let you get away with that.
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to defer to the work to Mr. Simpkins. But that would clearly be unfair. And it's never been levelled at Russell that he's old-fashioned, so I'm happy to take that on the chin as well. But you're absolutely right. There is clearly a need for a service specification. And this undoubtedly falls into the category, if I'd had more time, I'd have made this shorter. Yeah. There is no doubt about that. But the irony is that we're using a Sport England template which has been produced by public sector organisations, private sector organisations, contractors who are working the length and breadth on behalf of local authorities. And as I discussed with another councillor, perhaps that's what you end up with everybody throwing in their two pence. You end up with a massive document. And it's a good job that we didn't give you the earlier version that we were working on then, which was just shy of 100 pages. And if your heart sank on that, wait till you get to the executive board in November, when you've got a contract, you've got articles of association and a member agreement to work your way through. So good luck with that. But I take the point that there's no way that Russell, if he's operating a local authority trading company, if that's where it ends up, is going to be leafing through a 70-odd page document every Monday morning to check that he's got this right and that right, and the temperature of the water right, and the sports or whatever it is. But if you get into the detail and you read the specification, a lot of it is about exception reporting. And I'm sure one or two other councillors want to comment on how they see this moving forward, but it would be possible to produce a much shorter, workable document based on the strategic objectives that you've set, that we've previously reported on. So all that is in the art of the possible, and we'll try a bit more modern day thinking in the production of that, if that would help.
I think that would be really useful. As you say, this is probably a necessary contractual document, but it is not a working document. It isn't something that, as you say, whoever's running this is going to be looking at every day just to see if he's on track. And so it would be really helpful if at our next meeting you could bring forward a working document of this, which summarises exactly what Councillor McLaughlin was saying. These are the key things we want. These are the exception reports when things aren't going right. This is what's good when it does go right. This is what it looks like. So if that's a possibility, that will be fantastic. Yes.
I would still argue that if this isn't fit for purpose because of its lengthiness, that what is it actually achieving by being here? Is it just a bureaucratic. I understand that we obviously have to have contracts, but if those contracts aren't going to be implemented, or if those contracts aren't going to be in operational use, then surely it's redundant and there's no point us having this if we're going to be following a shorter, actual, realistic approach.
Well, I think it's like any contract. We hope we never have to open it again once it's there, but it's there. Because whilst, it's all very pally and I'm sure we'll get on really well and we'll all work towards the objectives, we need the control at the back of a contract that does cover every eventuality, just in case we have to open it and say, excuse me, you really aren't doing what we asked you to do. But it's not the working document that every day you will have the key performance indicators and what we want reporting back. But this happens in every contract. You've got really detailed stuff that you hope you never ever have to look at again once it's been agreed with whoever it is you're contracting with. I'm quite happy to open it up to the officers for a bit if you wish to.
Well, I'd say to you that that's what absolutely. You're right. The best contracts are the one you sign, put on the shelf, and never look at again. It's the service performing absolutely adequately. And I think the key for things like the board that's going to operate this, for the trading company, and for the members who are going to be overseeing it, and for the service board to look at it, is to look at is that feel that the Council of Cochrane is going over here. What are we trying to achieve here? What does success look like? It's back to them again, and how do we report on that? So those were the key things I think for the board to consider. But you're absolutely right. We need to treat this as a legal agreement with a binding contract and specification that covers absolutely every operation that we ask this company to deliver for us. And we can't leave any of it to chance. We can't say, well, do some stuff for us and we'll see what it looks like once you've done it, whether we're happy with it or not. We need, in a legal framework, to set out exactly what we expect to be delivered and what the consequences are if it's not. And that's what, unfortunately, these 78-page documents do. And as Simon says, there's a whole raft of other things to go with this that will say lots of similar things about other aspects of how the company is structured and how we deal with things. Hopefully, as I say, you won't look at them after they've been signed and sealed, but you will obviously want to get your teeth into what the service looks like, how it's delivering, and what the public thinks of it.
Yeah, I mean, I talked at length to Simon about the fact that we've got this 71-pager in front of us, and I understand, that other authorities like Redditch and Hertfordshire have got 61 pages and 53 pages as well as the sort of operating service manual that they have adopted using the same template. I think the problem I've got is that the idea that you have this and you just put it on a shelf to gather dust as a kind of working basis. I mean, a service spec to me should say, what is the nature of the service that we're providing? What standards do we expect in the way of operational health and safety, qualifications of staff? How many people are using it? Are these the people that we wanted to use it? And if not, what is the sort of developmental process by which we enable them to access it? How much is it costing, and how much efficiency can be got out of the system or driven into the system? And for me, this isn't a service spec. This is a kind of cut and paste of a whole lot of different standards, right down to the detail about water quality and if the glass is broken, what it should be replaced by in terms of safety of the glass, how many of the cancellations should be notified in advance. I mean, this for me is a bureaucratic straitjacket for anybody that wants to be entrepreneurial around taking this forward. And I thought the whole basis of why this was blessed and allowed to go ahead was that it would give scope for, growing the business. It wouldn't be fettered by, if you like, the bureaucracies of the local authority. And actually what we've got here is even more bureaucracy, I would suggest, than having it as an in-house arrangement where there is some freedom to staff to be innovative and experiment. And I don't think and I've looked at service specs in the health service, this doesn't to me read like a service spec. And God bless them, Sport England, if they think they can operate to this and actually making it a working tool against which staff will understand what they're expected to live on a day-to-day basis and when there's an exception, when they have critical incidents, what they're supposed to do. For me, it doesn't do any of that. And I don't think we should just accept that just because Sport England have issued this template, I don't know, 6 years ago, and that's what they expect us to follow, that we should adopt it. So I don't think it's acceptable. And the other thing I want to say is that, you know, we spent some time as members looking, and I think the job that we did was quite good, looking at the strategic objectives. So if you look at our strategic objectives, they're actually our mission, our aims, they've actually come out quite well. They're pretty comprehensive. You could map some of these standards and targets and activities and performance indicators against how we're doing in terms of great value leisure services, adapting for changing needs, meeting the needs of the more vulnerable group, positive experiences for children and young people, pathways, all of that. You could come up with some of the things that are in here and actually track across the extent to which these strategic objectives are captured in a service spec and the reporting arrangements that we could then use as the basis for a dialogue with the new provider. But actually, there's no connection. And when you, and if I could refer members to paragraph 211, we've got a section here which is described as managing performance against strategic objectives and a requirement on the operator to contribute to meeting those strategic outcomes. And then we've got a table under 3, which bears no relation to the strategic objectives that we've set at all. It's a complete hodgepodge of headings that actually bear no relationship. And you certainly couldn't map at the moment how the strategic objectives that we've this feature in these performance indicators. So I, for one, and I'm sure others may hopefully agree with me, I think we need to do a bit more work on this before it becomes a coherent document as a service specification. And I don't think we should accept this kind of cut and paste approach, because I think whoever is in charge of this will find them in almost 3 different regulatory environments if we're not careful. We'll be trying to respond here to this and then respond there to that. And I think there's confusion intrinsically built into this, into exactly what it is we want from this service and what are the most important things against the objectives that we set that we actually want to hold them to account and as well as support them in taking forward. And I don't think we've got that in this document. Maybe there's another document that's got to come, in which case this can just be stuck on a shelf. But I don't think it's even the basis for that at the moment. I think there's a lot more work needs to be done to get this right. And I think we could get it right with a bit more thought about how you track across. You remember in the health service, you talk about the golden thread that links what we want to do against what's being achieved and what kind of service. And I don't think we've got any golden threads. It's what we've got is a confused tangle of stuff, some of which has been lifted from Sport England and some of which has been lifted from our service improvement performance indicators. And I think it not only be a straitjacket, it'll also be very confusing and actually quite debilitating for anybody that's trying to pick out from here and respond to the meetings and the reports and all the rest of it. And I don't think that was the intention of the philosophy behind the arm's length relationship we were trying to put in place to enable this service to not only survive, but also grow and thrive under this arm's length arrangement. So I've said my piece.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock.
Actually, I understand everybody's points on the length of it, but for me, this is quite standard. In most agreements that I've ever worked with in business, we would be given this horrible piece of paper that somebody has to go through and tick off, then we get an SLA. This is just the basis of what we work on. This is not information that we will be running a company on or actually targeting on. That is up to the people who agree the SLAs, who agree what we want to do. But we have to have a basis. We have to have the info that unfortunately comes like that to start. And this is the start of the process. And for me, the work in here, yes, there is a lot of it. And some of it, yeah, the pool temperature and things like that. But if it's not right and someone's injured, guess what? If it's not set up, then we've got a problem. So for me, this is quite a standard piece of work for me.
Absolutely. I mean, it might be tedious, but it is important what the water quality is like. It is important what the glass quality is like. And that's the sort of detail. You see, this has been built up by lots of people working together, and that detail is really important. It isn't important for the day-to-day running, but it is important if something goes wrong. And that's why the contract has to be there. That's the legal basis. However, following on from what Anne said, you know, we do need, as we've agreed at the next meeting, to come forward with something that links to our strategic objectives and is a working document for every day. This is what we expect. This is the exception requirements, etc. That's what we need. Jodie.
I think Jackie was.
Well, I mean, I accept that all those finer points about health and safety and water temperatures and so on are all part of what I would see as a set of schedules or appendices that are attached to a service level agreement. But what we haven't got is a service level agreement. And so I think maybe there's an issue about the terminology in terms of our different understandings of what constitutes a service spec, what constitutes service standards and quality assurance, and the health and safety policies and procedures, etc., that need to surround all of that, which a good provider would intrinsically want to adopt anyway. And what we actually need as a borough council and as a board or whoever's going to be monitoring this to actually see as the basis for the service level agreement. There isn't an agreement bit in this. And if there's an SLA is the tool that we are going to use, then when is that going to be produced?
Next meeting, as we said.
Well, is it then?
Yes, we just agreed it. Yeah.
I was going to kind of comment on if this is in place, this is legally binding and defensible. But it also then ties us into if we are not following it operationally on a day-to-day basis, if it's not kind of intrinsically informing our SLAs and making sure that they do follow, then we're actually, if there's contradiction between the two, then that leaves us actually more open than it would do cover us. So I know from running several different policies and kind of health and safety measures that actually all these things have to be tied up. That if it's written in here, that it can't just be left on a shelf, it has to be implemented. Yes. And I think we are in danger of having things which we are assuming will be put on a shelf that actually could leave us open as much as protect us.
I don't think we were suggesting, David, that by putting it on the shelf that we were going to ignore it. It's just that it's the sort of thing we would expect any provider to provide. And it's just that if we happen to get a provider, sure we won't, that doesn't provide it, we can go back to the contract. It's not that well, I'll check with the officers. Is there anything in this that would contradict a service level agreement that we wish to put forward at the next meeting?
Through you, Chair, and I'm happy to defer to Richard as well for his views, but absolutely that shouldn't be the case, because the workable document that you're talking about will be drawn from your strategic objectives that you've already set, from some of the content in the service specification, from your key performance indicators and things like that. So there certainly shouldn't be any contradiction between those things.
Richard?
Well, I said there can't be a contradiction between those things. As Jodie says, if it's written in the service specification, it's got to be adhered to. So you can't expect, in good faith, a contract to step outside of the standards that you set out in your service specification. You're absolutely right in the sense that the key to this is, here's the minimum standards that you must achieve. We would expect a competent contractor, a competent company to deliver these without needing to be peering over their shoulder all the time. And their key duty is to get on and do all those things that we want to do, which is the health improvements and the service improvements and the flexibility around that. But this has to be the core requirement that we can go back to. And if there is any challenge on any of the things that haven't been achieved, we can't just leave it to the providers to do what they think is best. If that doesn't accord with what we think is an absolute minimum requirement, and somewhere that minimum requirement has to be set out, and it's here in this document. But you won't be worrying about when the core temperature is out by 0.1 degrees when you're considering whether the contractor is doing a good job or not. You'll be looking at what user satisfaction levels are like, number of visits, profitability, all those sorts of things. But in the background, Simon needs to know that he can turn to page 47 and say, hang on a minute, you're not doing this and you've got to do it because it's a requirement, it's a specification to change your ways. If he has to. We hope he never does.
Sorry, my concern would be that it's only defensible if we're actioning it on a regular basis. So that 0.1 degree, even though it is in the contract, if over 2 years we haven't enforced it, to then turn around after 2 years and say, actually, we're going to enforce page 47, leaves us in a difficult position. And if we haven't enforced it, then our common practice might be brought into question. And I think this is only enforceable if it ties in very closely with what we're actually wanting to achieve in the service level agreement. And then we come back to well, if we're going to have a service level agreement saying it anyway, then where does this document come redundant?
No,
If
it
it's all
doesn't
going to get
come redundant.
repeated.
There's no way. This is fundamental, the basis of, as we say, what a provider will provide. But we can't assume that any provider that we get will always provide what we think is the basic, which is why we have to have this contract. It's not being suggested that we won't enforce it. It's being suggested that we won't need to enforce it because it will be done, because it's general practice. But if we happen on the provider, if we happen to have chosen a provider, goodness hope we don't, that doesn't recognise that, we've got something to go back to. So all we're being asked to do today is to agree the legal document, dry as it is, long as it is, tedious as it is necessary, and it has been tested out there as the basis for this type of contract. At the next meeting, we will look at a working service level agreement, which will look at our aims and objectives and will not contradict this, but it will become more human and something that we can recognise as this is what we really want. So that's what we're being asked today, is to just agree the legal basis for going forward. So I'm going to ask then, now that we go back, that the board considers and approves or otherwise varies the content of the appended draft service specification, which will frame the service to be provided by the wholly owned leisure facilities local authority trading company. Can I have a proposer for that? Councillor Singh, seconded Councillor Humphreys. Those in favour? Somebody counting? Thank you. Looking at the back there. Okay, those against? Abstentions? 4 abstentions. Thank you. Thanks very much. And this is the end of our meeting. I'd like to say thank you very much to everyone for your contribution today. I think it's been a really good meeting and lots of contributions. Thank you to all involved and to the officers, of course, for their support. Even